G'day groovers, rockers, and in between. This is Vinyl Vibes. I'm your host, Jack Hodgins. Today, we are talking with legendary album cover designer, John Kosh. Kosh has been working in the designer field since the late 1960s. He became design director at Abbey Records in 1969, and his first job at the label was designing the Abbey Road album cover for the Beatles. After designing other British album covers such as Let It Be and The Who's Next, Kosh moved to LA to album design. His work in the 1970s includes designing the album cover for the Eagles' Hotel California album, Linda Ronstadt's album, Simple Dreams, and ELO's Out of the Blue album cover. After over 50 years in the designer field, he has designed over 400 album covers. G'day Kosh, and welcome to Vinyl Vibes.
Hello mate, I'm glad to be here, really.
I want to start at the beginning. Do you remember the very first album cover, of the first record you ever bought?
Oh my God, no. I mean, because I have a feeling I was getting into rhythm and blues, and when I was working, I guess I was buying American imports of Lead Belly, and I guess right through to, Albert King. And I mean, I guess somewhere around there, these were sort of like mostly mono pressings before stereo really hit. But I mean, yeah, I was working for the Royal Opera House at the time, so I mean, I was also sort of into classical music as well. I remember I shoplifted the Bach Goldberg variations once when I was a teenager. I guess Kant was already hit me with that one.
Were album covers you mentioned a lot of blues artists there. I mean, back in those days, were album covers pretty creative, or were they pretty? I'd imagine they would have been pretty simple.
The record labels would just stick a picture on the front, bang, and that was it of the art. So you got Frank Sinatra with a hat. Now he's not with a hat. So it wasn't until I think the dam burst, and I think the dam really burst with Sergeant Pepper. Because all of a sudden the artist was gaining power, and the art departments who weren't sort of very creative at the time, were sort of squeezed out, and people like myself, all of a sudden, who were dealing directly with the artists, could come up with, crazy innovative sort of designs and packaging, which were designed to sort of go with the music. I mean, it wasn't just like a free-for-all. It was one studied the music, one got to know the artists, and one designed accordingly, I mean, it was a dirty word, commercial art, but it was really a sort of form of commercial art because we were selling records. That's basically what we were doing, but having a lot of fun doing so, and sort of, exploring how far we could push the envelope.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And just in your own kind of early days, I mean, what was this kind of music you were listening to? I mean, you mentioned the blues, and I think you even mentioned classical music there. I mean, yeah, what kind of stuff what did you grow up listening to?
Well, I grew up listening, because my dad had a jukebox shop, and so I was listening to all the early American imports. Early for Britain anyway, because he had his jukeboxes out in the American air bases, and they wanted to hear their latest hits from home, or so anyway, I'm listening to Chubby Checker, I'm listening to Carl Perkins, I'm listening to all these records that are coming in to be put on the boxes, and of course, if they're coming in big boxes and stuck in the corner, I'm going to play them to see what's in them, So generally, I sort of gained this taste for American blues, and particularly rhythm and blues, not today's rhythm and blues, but and that's, I think, how I started.
When did you first start to get into album design? How does someone in that time period get into that, into that field?
It was an accident for me, because I was working for a magazine called Art and Artists, and I was sort of fielding all the great artists at the time. I was the art director for it. I mean, I wasn't actually the editor. And John Lennon wanted to put in his John and Yoko floppy disk. Do you know what that is? It's like a sort of piece of plastic, which is very, I think they're called flexi discs. And he wanted it inserted in the magazine, so he phoned me and said, "Hey, come and see me." And I thought it was a big put on. I thought it was friends making. But anyway, I turned up, and it was he. And all of a sudden, I'm, working for Apple Records, that is, and working on Abbey Road and Let It Be almost simultaneously. So sort of uncouth youth. I mean, all of a sudden I was just thrust into this sort of heavy world and heady world of rock and roll, which, believe me, was hard work, but boy, was it fun.
Apple Records, I mean, what was that like in we're talking the late 60s here? What kind of environment was it? Like, how did it feel like for you, like working there? Like, how would you describe that environment?
Well, it was a dynamo. I mean, from the outside looking in, one would think probably it was, chaos, but it wasn't. I mean, well, if it was chaos, it was organized chaos. Yeah, we'd be working through the night, if necessary, getting things out on time. We never missed a deadline. It was always on time. And because it was rock and roll and the Beatles and whatever else, I mean, there were substances and there was a little drinking going on. And the music kind of carried it. I mean, every album and single was a hit. It was like Stax or Motown. It was just like turning out this stuff that was, wonderful to hear. Some of it emanating from the basement studio, some of it coming in from Olympic and other places. But the mixture was kind of good because, stars will be, rock and roll stars will be wandering around. There'll be Eric Clapton, there'll be Leon Russell, Pete Townsend will be in and out. But in the meantime, I was lucky because I knew print very well because I started working for the British Printing Corporation. No one else did it in the organization. So now I'm a designer who can also handle print, which means that took a load off the people there who didn't know how to get things organized in time to go out because EMI had more or less said, okay, guys, you're on your own. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. But you don't realize it at the time because I was there and I was, all I was trying to do was pay the rent. I didn't realize that we were sort of creating icons at the time. But we did know who we were working for, believe me.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And look, I mean, you mentioned there, right place, right time, and of course, I think, yeah, definitely, because I mean, you've accepted this work at Apple Records, and then the first gig that you get is doing Abbey Road, the album cover. Like, can you take me through like how that kind of came to be?
It came to be, the deadline came creeping up. What was happening was, at the time I was working on Let It Be and Get Back, that was going to be the Black album as the answer to the White album, which is why I decided it back. It was there was no funereal sort of aspect to this. It was just because we had a White album, let's have a Black album, and that was supposed to be their swan song. But in the meantime, Abbey Road was sort of inserted with a horrendous deadline. The guys have been, working in the studios and finishing it and polishing it. And I think, the photo session was on Wednesday and I had to deliver art on Friday. So, I mean, I may be exaggerating, but it was that crazy. Choose the pictures, slap it together and get it out, not realizing that it would become the most parodied icon of all time. But Ian McMillan and I just, thought, my God, we've got to get this thing out. And we weren't too happy with the pictures, but too late, Then I went back to Let It Be again and got that out on time.
And I'm just thinking, like, Kosh, had you not have had those images, which were originally, I think, for just advertising for the Beatles, I mean, as the designer, how would you have gone about that? If you hadn't had those images, those iconic images that we know today, for whatever reason, just they hadn't been taken, how would you have gone about that? Like, what would you have done?
Well, I really don't know after 50 odd years. I mean, I would have probably gone home and sort of like sweated it out, trying to work out some great idea and probably pop-ups or cutouts or something, following the White Album, which was quite, lavish. I was probably thinking of doing something special. I mean, the Let It Be originally came out in a box with a book inside it. So I'd be thinking along those lines, but what the actual image on the front cover will be, I don't know. When it came to Let It Be, I was kind of forced into it because you could not get all four Beatles in one room at one time. So we just had to cherry pick pictures from the recording session. So that's how that came to be. But had I been left on my own to do Abbey Road, I have not a clue. I would have come up with something. And hopefully it would have been successful.
I've read too, Kosh, that they wanted to originally take the picture at Mount Everest, and I think they wanted to call the album Mount Everest or something like that. And I'm just thinking, like, I mean, this is more a hypothetical question for you. Like, as a designer, how would you, had you had all the time in the world, to have taken the Beatles, all of them wanted to do that. I think only Paul wanted to actually do that in the end. But how would you have gone about that as designer? Like, what would the logistics have been that you would have been looking at? Like, what had your role been to make that Mount Everest cover happen, had it, gotten off the ground?
Well, that really depends on whether the Fab Four would actually sort of travel, to the mountain and don sort of ski kits or whatever one does to climb mountains. I mean, I think I would have probably come up with a graphic solution because the mountain itself is very recognized. It's a shape like the Matterhorn, it's got a shape to it. And seeing as that the name Avarice, I think, came from a brand of menthol cigarettes that the engineer, who may have been Jeff Emery, was smoking, I think I would have gone probably in the graphic cover design, probably. I don't know. I mean, it's like, it's all hypothetical, because you could be taking a day thinking, I got it, On the other hand, you might spend sort of endless nights worrying about it. And, you never know when the idea is going to come to you. But when it does, you've got to present it in such a way that the band think, oh yeah, it's good, we get it, and leave you alone from that point on.
You mentioned "Let It Be" there, and how the album cover came to be, and I'm looking at like how when it was still called "Get Back," and I think, and correct me if I'm wrong again, Kosh, but I think the original image for "Get Back" was a recreation of the "Please Please Me" cover, right?
Yes, they got beards, and that was the original idea. I comped it up as "Let It Be" and "Get Back" because they were sort of vacillating. I think it was John couldn't make up his mind what the titles would be. So we got fully comped that one, shot it and everything. Yeah, and it's I've still got one copy of it left. Cool. But someone's got all the originals somewhere worth a lot of money, probably.
Yeah, what was the decision making in not making that like the album cover? Because I think, I mean, of course people probably didn't know at the time it was going to be their last record, but I mean that would have been, had that have been the image, that would have been like such a, I just think it would have been a perfect ending, you know what I mean? Like having that,
Yeah, I do indeed. That was the very first album, now the very last album, but that one can never actually guarantee it would be the very first live album. In fact, it wasn't Abbey Road. Well, it was pushed. But yeah, I mean, it was a great idea. I don't know whose idea it was. I think actually it was Neil Aspinall's idea. But it was shot by Angus McBean, which is also, like 15 years later. Because the Beatles span actually wasn't that long. But their legacy is like getting on for 60 years, which is longer than any of the great stars of all time. I mean, Rudolph Valentino lasted until the 50s, from the 30s. That gave him 20. But these guys are just cranking on, which is great. It means you and I are talking.
That must be so good for you too, Kosh, having curated all these, and been a part of all these things, and being able to say, 50 years onwards, that you've done these things. I mean, is that a pretty meaningful thing for you to be able to look back on those things?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can't believe, to be honest, I've been designing for 60 years. I mean, started out in knee pants almost, it seems. Because I mean, it wasn't, it's also other artists I work with, like I still have a great friend in Linda Ronstadt. We've done 26 albums in electric like orchestra and Stones and So the build up is, when you look back on it, it's like, wow, I was doing all this just to pay the rent. The doors opened in, now I'm in California, which compared to my, London where I lived is paradise.
Of course, you saw the what would become the Beatles' last performance on the rooftop, and I mean, you guys at Apple, did you know like that was going to happen? Like, was there talk about it, or did you just kind of turn up and they kind of just did it?
I mean, I'm sure the Beatles and Neil Aspinall and management knew it was going to happen. I presume you've seen Peter Watkins' film and how that evolved. But I just think it was like, oh my God, this is going to happen tomorrow, sort of thing, because planks of wood are going up on the roof to sort of reinforce it. Probably wasn't adequate for all the weight that was up there, actually, but luckily nothing happened. And it just evolved. It was sudden, but we all knew it was the swan song. It was the end. That was pretty obvious.
Yeah,
because we'd all gone back that Ringo had been off making films. Paul and John were supposedly not talking, which was actually not true. They were, and because I'd witnessed them playing together. But nonetheless, it was, the staff knew that it was the end, but they were determined to sort of go out with a bang on the records that were coming out and the music. And, it wasn't a sad moment, actually. It was a joyous sort of, so some of the rumors about how dire it all was, which Peter Watkins' film sort of blew away, thank God, because I was the only one saying, no, we had a great time.
I know you moved to, I think it was 1973, you went to America, and I've been thinking to myself, Kosh, had you stayed in the UK, I think you probably would have really enjoyed the punk scene, do you reckon? Like creating album covers for the punk scene?
I absolutely would have done, yeah. I mean, I think I might have been too long in the tooth for that, I don't know. But my companion, my girlfriend I'm living with now, she was a famous punk rocker in the 70s. They had a band, seminal girl band. And so I'm actually sort of coming up to speed on punk right now. I must admit I was sadly sort of missing a lot of stories. But now it's all coming together and I'm beginning to, understand what it was all about. Yeah. But I was sort of like persona non grata at that point when punk started coming in because I was rock and roll. Therefore, it was particularly coming from the West Coast, which was soft rock. It was hard. It was actually hard to break into California anyway because it was so cliquey. But managers, on the other hand, did like the idea of their clients being really well looked after, and that was my gift. We could really look after a client, and then they begin to trust me, and they would enjoy the sessions that we did.
Yeah.
So they come back, which is good. And, you get a Grammy or two and you can raise your fees a bit.
Yeah, I mean, do you prefer like the modern technology then to say when you were like doing stuff in the 60s and 70s?
Well, yeah, I mean, but it's evolved in such a way that, I mean, I look back on it fondly, because we had a lot of fun at the time doing it. But, nowadays when, it's so effortless now. And and one of the problems we had, of course, is the palette that we were using started to shrink and shrink and shrink. I mean, first we went, to the sets, and now we're getting like 2 inch by 2 inch at 72 dpi downloads. But you've still got to come up with the image. You've still got to. That thought process has not changed. What has changed is how we deliver it, which now is like you don't schlep across the country with a handful of tissues. You just sort of pop off a JPEG or two.
Yeah, are people utilizing the album cover then enough? I mean, like in terms of its like are album covers still of a high quality? Do you think?
Well, now the 12-inch square is coming back. I mean, vinyl is coming back big time here. I don't know about what you guys are. And printing processes are as good as they ever were. So yeah, you can expect to have a really nice piece put together by and beautifully pressed too. And as I say, if you're an audiophile, you've got great sound, analog sound, which is something to relish. I mean, I got a speakers on the setup, which delivers exactly as it was in 1976. Blows you out the room, in other words.
You mentioned the vinyl resurgence as well, and I think I've heard in like other interviews of you, and you've kind of say like when back in the day it was great walking to a record store because you had your art gallery of all your albums like that you curated up there, and I mean that must be so great for you now having seen the record stores come back a bit, and now your art gallery has returned in a way.
Well, yeah, it's not very little of my stuff's up there anymore. I must confess because the whole generations have changed, music has changed. But in the day, I mean, I think I had like 10 albums in the top 100, Billboard 100 at one point. And to walk into the store and see them actually up on the wall, or even blown up to 3 foot square was a big thrill. It was a good ego stroke, put it that way.
And another album, I think, and one that is quite iconic because of the design that you did for that, and that was the Rolling Stones' Through the Past, Darkly, Big Hits Volume 2. And I mean, how, like, as a designer, like, how do you go about that? Like, in terms of like, do you have to communicate a lot with like the production side of things, like the manufacturing people a lot, because just to see if it's possible? Yeah, like, how did you go about that? Yeah,
I mean, you got to. I mean, because you can't just suddenly deliver something which they can't fabricate. So you have to sort of work out. I mean, you can fall into traps. I think one of the traps that I didn't do, but not, as the Faces Nut Gone Flake was a totally circular cover, which because there was only like an inch left for the hinge, it all fell apart and the record fell out. So you have to be conscious of the fact that if you're going to do an 8-sided figure, there's got to be enough there, and there's got to be enough glue flaps to hold it so it's stiff. So you phone up the printer, Garrett and Lofthouse, and you say, look, I'd like to do this. And the label doesn't know this yet, so we've got to work out a price, And so I get very involved in it. Otherwise, there's going to be a disaster along the line somewhere. The sticky fingers with the zipper, that ruined hundreds of thousands of records when they started piling them all on top of each other as the zipper sort of pressed into the grooves. I mean, I just realized it wasn't my cover, it was Andy Warhol's, but if you move the zipper down into the middle, it just went into the hole in the middle of the record and didn't damage it. But, until someone had thought of that idea, there's been a few things like this. I think the Bee Gees once came out with a totally flock sleeve. And all the fluff just get caught in the groove. So when your stylus is, he just grows a big sort of mushroom of fluff, and doesn't play anymore. There's been a lot of disasters along the line.
What were some of the designs that, like, at the time, like 60s and 70s, that, like, were there any particular album cover designers that you kind of took inspiration from a lot? Like, are there any names that you can kind of think of?
Yeah, there was a few of us at the time. Not so many in Britain. But when I came to America, of course, it was Rod Dyer, Mick Haggerty, and some really great designers turning out stuff. So it was a bit of a challenge to suddenly think, oh my God, and because the fabrication techniques in America were so much greater, I think that sort of spawned a whole load of people experimenting. But the people who were experimenting, like John Van Hammersfeld and others, knew what they were doing, knew where they were going. Yeah, there were some designers around. I mean, some of them are still my friends, the ones that are still alive, a lot of them gone. It's like photographers, we all sort of stick together as best we can, sort of, to just remember the good old days. But nothing else, we're all working, so we're all still working. So that's good news.
Oh, definitely. No, that is good news. And I mean, I think you mentioned there that I might have heard wrongly, but but did you say that, like, in the US, that the album covers were of a better quality? Like, you can get a better quality in terms of the manufacturing?
No, I don't know. The albums when I first came over were the because of the petroleum sort of OPEC, the lack of petroleum or whatever. The vinyl that we were printing on in America, stamping on in America, was definitely substandard. And the cardboard that they were printing on was not that good. But the fabrication processes of cutting and folding and then stamping and embossing, were easier to get online here because the machines were bigger. So everything in America is bigger, So, but then, of course, now it's vastly improved. I mean, now we're pressing silent grooves, with great music coming out of them. I noticed a lot of the pressings actually are coming in from Japan and Germany, and they're fabulous. Our work coming in.
Yeah.
So that's kind of nice. They did a really good job,
As someone that's kind of been in the album cover designing game for so long, I mean, if you could curate, like, with the best like machinery, best cardboard, best printing materials, like, what would you use to create the best, like, the ultimate album cover in a way, like, in terms of materials?
Oh, everything. I mean, if I can, emboss, if I can make it stand up and pop out, I would. It all depends how much budget I'm allowed. But I think they've replaced all those forests I've destroyed in the meantime, doing pop-ups and fold-outs and whatever else. But I'd love to experiment and play. I mean, but no, I don't think anyone's going to come up with I can't let me go in with a concept like that yet, unless they're incredibly heavy artists, because I mean, in the days gone by, if you spend a few $1,000s on design and you spend a few $100,000, well, maybe not that much, but tens of thousands of dollars on the album cover, that's nothing, if you're doing a Hotel California, because in 3 weeks they're going to bring in 6 million. They would have sold 6 million copies. It's $6 a time.
Yep.
So what's a few $1,000s? Nothing. So the budgets in those days, no one really gave a damn. Nowadays, I think everything's a lot tighter, and you can get a student to work $500, isn't it? Why would you, spend something? I mean, I still have a few clients who kind of like the idea of me working for them. Jimmy Buffett's been one of them.
You mentioned there, like, the budgets have obviously changed over time, and now students can kind of, I mean, and also with the technology too. I mean, has that made it better, do you think, that now there's greater accessibility?
Don't forget, we were all students once, and we were all trying to show off, and we were all trying to sort of break in. So I mean, I don't resent students working, particularly if they're good, and some of them are absolutely fantastic. I think it's better for that. I mean, there's still a lot of junk out there. There's no doubt about it. And it makes me wince when I see a really good album with a bad cover, but I guess, other people are wincing if they see a really great cover with a lousy album in it. I don't know, one hopes to get one hopes to do a great cover on a great album, and that turns it
Yeah.
into history.
Yeah, that's the goal, definitely. And you know, on album cover budgets, I know that an album cover that you designed, I think it cost like 40 grand, was Hotel California, and I mean, they're fantastic cover. And I mean, yeah, can you take me through how that kind of like came to be? I think you had to shoot like 3 different locations, and then
And when those days, what we did actually to was wouldn't just sort of turn up with tissues or Polaroids, if you remember. But you're too young to know about Polaroids. But yeah, you would actually mock the cover up. But I would. My secret was to actually make it like 3 foot square, with a big Chrome. But yeah, David Alexander, the great photographer and dear friend, we went out and just checked out the hotels, and it was obvious when we sort of started shooting the Hotel California itself, the Beverly Hills. As the sun went down, we got it. There was just no doubt about it, because it was both California and slightly sinister, and and I presented it to the band, and it was filled the table, and it was just like if the mouths dropped. In the same way that my mouth dropped when I heard the title track, when I got the brief, and I just knew that was going to be a smash hit. Until that point, I wasn't actually a big Eagles fan, but then I suddenly heard that, and I thought, well, we've got to do some really good job for this one.
yeah, and I've read, I think the album cover was taken in Ektachrome film, and I know that you went more the photography side of things, but like, what was your kind of like when you were shooting in film, like what was your favorite kind of film to use?
Well, every film stock was different, for different jobs. If you're doing a portrait for, like, so we say James Taylor, ultra fine grain black and white film, Ilford. No, that's the first one, FP3 or something. But Ektachrome, Kodachrome. Ektachrome, you could push a few stops and make it extra grainy, but it's kind of very attractive grain. We did that for Simple Dreams, Linda Ronstadt's, and that's what gave it that quality. But it all depends what you're shooting on. Sometimes we'd actually shoot on 8x10 Polaroids, and that will become the master art. And there's absolutely no grain whatsoever in that. You've got to work out if you're going to retouch it. If you're going to take out wrinkles and things like this, can you do it on the grain, or do you do it before you add the grain? So it's a thought process all the way along the line. But you have to everything has to look spontaneous.
You designed the Eagles album after that, The Long Run, and it's and I love the differences in those album covers, because the Long Run is quite minimalist. Like, I mean, what was in comparison to Hotel California? Yeah, like what was the inspiration to go in such a different kind of direction to the last kind of Eagles album?
It was supposed to be their swan song. That was supposed to be, because the Eagles have broken up how many times and come back together again, I don't know. And Henley said he wanted something very, very simple. And, minimalism is kind of something I like to do, play with, negative spaces and whatever. And, I decided to put a matte cover on the front and back. And when you open it, it was glossy, one of Jim Shea's really glossy sort of pictures, so he'd opened into something special. Henley didn't agree with me about that, but anyway, that's another story. But yeah, I mean, I design specifically for the music, or what what I think should be there. You probably noticed I don't have a style. My style is not having a style. I design what I think is going to be suitable for the artist and the music. And, I've had to put preconceived notions to one side. Doesn't mean to say I might suddenly come up with an idea and then 3 weeks later, after exploring the whole situation, go back to it. I mean, sometimes that happens. Yeah, there are serendipitous covers, and there are covers which are carefully planned, and lighting rigs are sort of carefully drawn, and with the hotel, with Simple Dreams, all those mirrors that she's sitting in front, try to take that without the camera being reflected, or me holding up the doom. So you draw these things out very, very carefully, and then it looks like a snapshot.
Yeah, and of course, Simple Dreams. I think you because you won a Grammy for your work on that album cover, and I love the way it looks, because I mean, to my eyes, I mean, like, how do you? Because looking at the album cover, and I look, this might just be my eyes, but it looks like it has like you've kind of made it look like have a painting feel to it, like the cover, kind of like the image, like.
Yeah, I mean, we cooked the film. In other words, we sort of exposed it, underexposed it, and then overdeveloped it. with some experimenting. Believe me, you don't just do it without thinking about it very carefully and doing tests. And that's how we got that nice sort of soft, grainy sort of quality that if you put a loop and magnifying lens on it, you can see it's all made up of different colors. Each spot, it's like a very pretty sort of little pattern of.
I mean, because you mentioned the process there. I mean, was that done like the Simple Dreams cover? Was that like with the underexposing and all the kind of things you did with that? Was that done with the negatives, or did you copy the negatives before you did that, or did you get?
Yeah, there was a positive. This was positive. We started out by using a special film. It's called GAF 500, which was discontinued when we had to do a reshoot, and so we now had to experiment with the Ektachrome. But we're talking about positive film, which is another process, because you have to sort of shine light at it as you're developing it, make it change from negative to positive. So there's a lot of darkroom work involved. And a lot of darkroom work can go on all night.
And I know like from hearing other interviews of you that your favorite artist to work with is Linda Ronstadt. And I mean, what is it about working with Linda, like in the working relationship you guys have that you really enjoy so much?
Trust, I think. With Simple Dreams, she wanted to go. I knew what she wanted to go and how she wanted to be soft, but for Mad Love, she wanted something tougher. And so that sort of shot where she's in the phone booth looks like it was just a sort of quick shot, which is what it's supposed to. But in fact, we lit the box. We worked on it the day before. And when she turned up, we just gave her a roll of quarters and told her to make phone calls. And she phoned Jerry Brown, the governor of California, of course, and we just shot and shot and shot. And there's that one picture where she not only looks kind of tough, but she looks beautiful at the same time, and that also has got a grain. Well, she's got quite a lot of grain in that black and white to make it look like it was an accidental shot, because the music kind of sounded like, there was a lot of toughness to it, and a lot of, it was, I think it's one of my favorite covers of hers, actually. It's kind of very strange, but because it was, war correspondent Peter Howe flew in to take the picture. He was a friend of mine, but the sort of guy comes around with a sort of tin helmet with bullet holes in it.
In 1977, you had Hotel California, you had Simple Dreams, and of course, I think, and then also you had the Out of the Blue album cover by ELO. You mentioned earlier when we were talking about your early days that I think you mentioned your dad worked with jukeboxes, and that, of course, that's what inspired the ELO logo. Can you take me through that?
I mean, that was because I wanted electricity, I wanted light, I wanted music. I mean, a jukebox obviously is an icon. You could say it has all three encompassing it. And so I took the top of a 1015 jukebox, the very famous one with the bubble tubes and whatever else that. And I saw, if you look at the ELO lettering, it kind of looks like General Electric logo, at the time. So I think it sort of encompassed the whole image. The band needed a logo. I mean, they hadn't got one. So for the world record, I gave them a logo. And then we created stickers, and I stuck a sticker on a Frisbee and threw it to my son. And you know that story. As it sailed through the air, I thought, there it is. There's Out of the Blue. So there's an idea that just comes out of the blue, and didn't take much thinking about.
Yeah.
Except sort of, commission actually painting it. I think it took quite a while to actually sort of get it to be realised. But it came with pop-ups. There was a space station inside that you could put together yourself, and a poster, and I don't know what else. But there again, the budget was unlimited. I've no idea what. But the fabrication alone must have, because it was embossed, it was gatefold, and it was inserts, and all these inserts had to be done by hand, special sleeves, special labels. It must have cost a fortune, probably more than Hotel California, but I don't know. My fees were the same.
Yeah, I mean, was there much money in it at the time in the 70s, the album cover design?
Well, it was okay. I mean, it wasn't fabulous. I mean, I think I got paid £750 for Abbey Road. Which is nothing. I mean, I guess it's what in today's money is like $2 grand possibly. But the story that hinges on that is the fact that the check I received for that was signed by Paul and John, and these are the guys who are not supposed to be talking to each other. Okay, then it's strange, and I had to cash it. I had to cash that. But how much would that be worth today?
A lot more than £750, probably. I can tell you that much.
But no, the fees, my fees sort of increased as I got more, well known.
Yeah.
But they weren't exorbitant because they were people away. And I was known for doing, occasional pro bono work. And sometimes artists who weren't well known, who I thought their records were really good, I would work with them,
Yeah.
But generally speaking, some of the more awkward clients I've now gotten rid of course, because they, not enough money to pay you shrink, So nowadays I only work with people I like to work with who are mostly friends now. So
yeah, look, and just like we're just before like we go, Kosh, I wanted to mention this album cover, which I think at the time, I don't know if it really got and it's one of your album covers that I don't think it really got the attention that it deserved, because I think I think it was bold, I think it was ambitious, because it was so different to everything that was kind of on the market at the time, and that was your work on Flag by James Taylor. What made you want to do an album cover like that? Because it's just so different to like anything that was at the time.
Actually, being a sailor, I don't know what, was fascinated in flags, and I found the front, because he was kind of strung out at the time and not very well. The flag on the front is a nautical flag for man overboard, okay? And the flag on the back in blue is man rescued. And that's how the concept came. And I decided that, the only thing that says James Taylor will be the sticker on it. So once you rip the sticker, the shrink wrap off, you're just left with the flag. And that was it. And it would be full bleed on the album. And I don't think the album did very well, actually. I don't think it was my cover that caused the problem, but inside, it was full of pictures and whatever else, So you got your money's worth eventually. But I'm glad you like that, because no one mentioned it. Rolling Stone tore me a new one over it. But they actually said the album's okay, but why was it put in such a bland cover? And I thought, well, it's maybe minimalist, but it's not bland. I mean, it's Dayglow pink and Dayglow yellow, But anyway, I was upset, and James said to me, one thing you should never do is read your reviews. And he doesn't, so I don't anymore.
That's probably great advice too for any artist of any kind. And well, Kosh, it's been great, being able to talk to you about all these things. And I mean, like, what, and just before we go, like, what's next for you? Like, what are you working on anything at the moment? Like, do you have any plans to what you're going to work on?
Genevieve, my partner and I are working on a book on national parks, American national parks, with the great photographer Andy Katz. He used to be Dan Fogelberg's photographer. Now he's a landscape photographer of some note. We're working on that. There's a documentary that's been sort of put together about me, which I'm playing on. Things are sort of starting to cook, after the pandemic, which was, really impossible. I downsized my big studio in Hollywood and now working at home in a nice little cozy studio with, you don't need like 7 computers anymore, you just need the one I'm talking to you on. It's big and it works and it's fast. So we're working, and all my friends are working too. So, your documentary, that's Jen just popped right in. Yeah, I'd mentioned the documentary. Yeah, we're working on that, and that's a big thing. So, that's going to probably list just about everything I've done. So hopefully that will sell.
Well, Kosh, I want to thank you so much for your time today. It's been it's been great talking with you.
Cool, man. Thank you very much for doing that. It's good to speak to you down there, of all places. That's cool.
That was legendary album cover designer John Kosh. If you'd like to check out more of Kosh's work and upcoming Kosh-related releases, head to his website at koshdesign.com. Remember to share this episode with other music fans. And if you really enjoyed this edition, we'd love it if you leave a review. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Vinyl Vibes. And to all those music lovers out there, stay groovy.